welcome back to Beyond the Trailhead. This week is a great week for us. We've got Thor on from Alpacka Raft. Thor, thank you so much for joining us this week.
Happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, I know you're out in Colorado. I'm here in Atlanta, but wanted to have you on because I had a trip a while back, and it was out in some alpine, and there was some alpine lakes, and I was like, man, I want to do some potentially take a raft on the lake and do some pictures for a client of mine. And I saw your rafts, and one, visually they look really, really cool. And then secondly, I started to get into the whole, like, for me, the ultralight side of, oh, they've got really light rafts that function really well and are really durable. So later on, once we started the podcast, I thought I'd really love to have you on and chat more about you and your brand, how you guys even became to be, and the growth of the company, and then also the challenges of, I'm sure there's challenges when you're working with water that a lot of people don't expect. And so I guess without further ado, just running right into it, let us know a little bit more about yourself and the history of your company.
Yeah, we've been around. We're closing in on 25 years, which I got my son here. He's gonna say
Hey,
hi.
buddy.
This is Waylon. But we've been around 25 years now, which is crazy. I can't believe it's been that long. And we started the company all the way back 2000 to 2002 range.
Oh, wow.
And before that, pack rafting was not a I won't say we didn't invent the sport of pack rafting. I want to
Yeah.
be very clear about that. Pack rafting predates alpaca by a long ways, but we basically have invented the modern version of the sport. So before alpaca, there it was confined to a few people in various parts of the world, mostly Alaska, where in Alaska you have huge landscapes with huge bodies of water. And so if
Yeah.
you want to move across the landscape in Alaska and you don't have a boat with you, you will get stopped because the rivers and lakes they're just too big and too
Wow.
dangerous to cross without anything but a boat. And so I got introduced to it through that process. I got some grants in college to go do these big, and I grew up in Alaska. I got grants in college to go do these big traverses in Alaska. And I got introduced to the sport of pack rafting by one of the forefathers of the sport. His name's Roman Dial. And he said, you got to try this pack rafting thing. But there was no boat on the market to do it.
Yeah.
There was a boat made in the 80s that was of reasonable durability and quality, but it was really built for mountain lakes like you're talking about. And so we took vinyl pool toys, the Seveler trail boat. It was made to look like a little mountain lake boat, but it was really made out of the same vinyl that you'd find on a pool inner tube.
Okay.
And we took those across Alaska, and the concept worked. Like, wow, we can really traverse across the Brooks Range using these.
Yeah.
But hypothermia was a real thing because they were very narrow in the front and they scooped up water and you're sitting in water, and we didn't have dry suits, we didn't have PhDs or anything like that. So we were 20 years old, so we were pretty tough. And, uh, but so the idea worked, but the product didn't.
Yeah.
And my mom had her entire career in outdoor clothing design. So she'd done ski clothing in Jackson Hole and Utah, and she was a kayaker. And so she really wanted to get back into business. And I was in college. My sister was nearly done with high school. She had more time on her hands. So we got together. I gave her this is what I need to do these trips. And she designed the actual craft. And the
Wow.
original boat we made 25 years ago was just like, it looked like a miniature raft. It's a pack raft. It's a
Yeah.
packable raft. And over the 25 years that we've been making boats, they've really evolved from these tiny little 3 to 5 pound durable large tubes, but kind of like a cork in the water, to
Is it?
now they're much more high performance uh, paddlecraft, and they will
Yeah.
do 90% of what a whitewater kayak will do, or a flat water kayak will do, or a sea kayak will do. And so we've really evolved over the years into that.
Wow. And um, I love your mom's designs of the rafts. I love the color choices and everything else. Um, so you did, and I know this just because I've read it all already. But you did like 600-mile pack rafting trip in
Yeah.
Alaska.
We
with
did
with those
2.
prototypes, or whatever?
Yeah, with the, Settler boats. We
Yeah.
did 2. So in 1998, we did a 165-mile traverse of the Alaska Range following a route that Roman and Dial had recommended to us.
Okay.
And then 2 years later, we got a grant and we spent 39 days doing 6 to 700 miles, I don't have the exact mileage,
Yeah.
across the Brooks Range. So
Okay.
starting over in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, kinda in the center of there, and then working our way, and the Brooks Range is actually the continental divide because what flows north goes to the Arctic Ocean, what flows south goes to the Pacific Ocean.
Okay.
And, so we kinda worked our way across the spine of the Brooks Range over those 600 miles.
Okay.
And on those trips, we did a lot more walking and then floating, and that's the original concept of pack rafting. Was the
Yeah.
boat was really there in case you need it
Yeah.
to cross a river to get a few miles downstream, but you're
Yeah.
not spending a ton of time on the water because the boat, again, you're getting hypothermic, you were getting wet, and the boats were delicate. So you didn't, if the walking was good, we would walk rather than paddle.
Okay.
It's 180 degrees today. People are like, "Hmm, as soon as I can paddle, I'm paddling, and I'm
Yeah.
paddling far." So I'm doing as little walking as possible to get to the
Yeah.
floating.
Yeah. Well, because I back when I grew up in Canada, and so we did some portaging and stuff like that. So I was in canoes and stuff like that, and we'd be carrying it for forever. And so, man, when I hear about like a pack raft, I'm like, gosh, why didn't we have these when I was a kid? Because that would have been a lot easier than taking that. And now it was a different type of trip, of course, but I think the fascination for me is, one is the ability to take something that in the genre of the stuff that I do is something that's light enough that I can now go and enjoy the places that I'm going to watch, are going to hike to, and be out on the water where no one else is, right? Where everybody else is, sitting on the shoreline, and I can go out there, I can go fishing, I can chill out there if I want. I can even cross the lake and then continue my trip instead of walking around the lake, depending on how big it is, what my trip is, and stuff like that. So I guess, what is your demographic, would you say, of the people that buy your rafts? I know you have so many different categories, but is there like one big main category that you find that you're at? I know you've come up with a couple new rafts this year, so I know you're in different categories too.
You know, our demographic has long been people looking for backcountry adventure.
Yeah.
And the early years, it was all that. Everybody's doing big, kind of Alaska, Canada trips.
Yeah.
And then the demographic kind of started, I'm not, shouldn't say soften, but started to shift a little bit. And
Yeah.
people started doing traditional river trips with the boats. And a lot of that is attributable to the performance of the boats increased it. They tracked better. They have gear. We added a airtight zipper into the stern of the boat so you can put your gear inside the boat. And made a
Yeah.
huge difference. We added a spray deck so you'd stay dry and warm. And then we added thigh straps so you have control. So suddenly now you have a boat that is will outperform a traditional ducky or something like that. And so
Yeah.
people are buying them just to go do, um, you know, normal river trips.
Yeah.
And then the, so I would say we're more like 60-40 traditional river trips and 40% kind of traditional pack rafting trips where you do a
Okay.
lot of walking and then some floating. And
Yeah.
then a lot of people are doing what I would call, um, they're traditional river trips, but they are, um, pack raft focused. So
Yeah.
low water, or there is a hike in to do. Um,
Okay.
and those are really, really popular pack rafters, especially out west, because you do have some hike in rivers that are low volume that
Yeah.
you can't hike in a 50-pound kayak into. You can't
Yeah.
hike in a 100-pound raft to, but
Yeah.
they're in the backcountry. They're really beautiful. Montana has some, Idaho has some, Colorado has some, Utah has some great ones. Not
Yeah.
this year because there's no water, but that's kind of what we're looking at.
Okay. And I guess kind of going back into creating the rafts themselves and stuff like that. I know a lot of people are creating different products that might be um, easier manufacturing wise. I know that you're doing a lot of your manufacturing, if not all of it, here in the US, right?
Yes, all of our
Okay.
boats are made. in Mancos, Colorado.
Yeah. So putting those boats together, like I alluded to earlier, the water and stuff like that. Hey, buddy.
Hey, do you want
The
to say hi?
um, talking about the water and stuff like that, with your product specifically, what challenges did you run into when you first, or when your mom and you started first creating the raft, putting things together? I'm sure there were challenges when you're making something like that, because you're going to run into punctures or leaks, or again, it's fascinating to me. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, really interesting. We've had, uh, the earliest challenge was just how do we make these things? How do
Yeah.
we source the fabric? How do we, we are just, um, mom and me in our basement trying to figure these out. And really, you need specialized equipment to make these boats. And
Yeah.
so early on, we actually had to get them manufactured originally by a company called Jack's Plastic Welding, which is just about 50 miles from here. We were in Alaska at the time. And then
Okay.
eventually by a company called Feathercraft, which used to make folding kayaks in Vancouver, BC. And then in 2008, as the business had grown, my mom moved down here to Southwest Colorado from Alaska and started her own factory. But a lot of that means like we had to, get enough money to buy a $30,000 taping machine and a
Yeah.
$50,000 RF welder. And you start buying those machines, and we've just slowly accumulated them over time. So that was kind of the initial challenge.
Yeah.
And then there was a challenge of getting the right fabrics. And when you're really tiny, like we were in the beginning, nobody wants to talk to you. So you're
Yeah.
like, "Hey, we're gonna make 50 rafts." And they're like, "Yeah, you need to buy 5,000 yards of this stuff before we'll even talk to you." And you're like, "Well, that
Yeah.
makes 500 rafts, and I can't do that."
Yeah.
And so we kind of got lucky, and a few people took, I would say, pity on us and liked the idea, even though they knew how small it was.
Yeah.
And so we got lucky there and got some early fabric. And now we're big enough that we can get exactly the fabrics we want and stuff like that. So a lot of those problems have gone away, but early on there were those problems. The other real problem that we had was I would say acceptance, and kind of where I talk about the evolution of the sport. In the early years, the people that wanted to do this were um they were pack rafters. They wanted to
Yeah.
go do these big traverse routes, but every time they take if you showed up in 2008 to a put in at a normal river,
Yeah.
y at best, you got sort of the, "What is that?"
Yeah.
But more likely you got, "Do you know what you're doing? Do you know what this
Yeah.
river is? Why are you here? You're going to die. That's
Yeah.
dangerous." All of these things were happening. And
Yeah.
then they'd see you run, some class 3 rapid, and they'd be like, "I can't believe that boat can do that." And then they wanna buy one. But there was a long time of acceptance. And
Yeah.
if you go dig back deep into the archives of blogs and forums and people asking about pack rafting 15 years ago, there's a lot of negativity from
Yeah.
the kayaking crowd, from the rafting crowd. And now their pack rafts are widely accepted from those groups. They
Yeah.
don't necessarily like them, but they respect them and understand the how they can perform in water and how good that
Yeah.
is. What's funny is you brought up being Canada and all the canoeing routes and stuff like that. And that's an area where we haven't made a lot of headway. And it's funny, we're running into exactly the same
Yeah.
pushback this year that I feel like it's deja vu because we came out with these flat water boats, which are longer, narrower, they track much better, they're much
Yeah.
faster. It's one of the real problems with pack rafts in what I would call the boundary waters, Canadian lake systems, the Northeast, where you're linking together lake systems with
Yeah.
portages, is the pack rafts are slow, and I get
Yeah.
that. And so they're not as convenient as a canoe. And so we're getting people saying, have they ever been to the boundary waters? These aren't going to work here. And I'm seeing the same sort of comments on
Phew.
Reddit that I saw 15 years ago from whitewater kayakers and rafters.
Yeah.
And my response to a lot of that is kind of, we were never trying to replace kayaks. We were trying to
Very
make
good.
an alternative craft that's useful in situations where a kayak is not useful. If you have
Yeah.
to hike it in, if you want to put it on an airplane, if you want to put it on a small plane in Alaska, any of those things,
Yeah.
packraft is great. And it's a very good learning craft in the whitewater realm because it's very
Yeah.
stable, easy to handle, stuff like that. Well, in the flatwater realm with these new flatwater boats, I don't think they're gonna, and I don't intend them to replace your traditional classic boundary waters
Yeah.
routes or the routes you've got in the Canadian lakes, where you've got beautiful, well-built portages and routes and campsites and stuff like that. Take your canoe. That's what I would take. I
Yeah.
own kayaks. I own rafts. I love all the different paddling types.
Yeah.
But I think the Boundary Waters has 27 primitive management areas, and these are like
Hmm.
the remote spots that are
Yeah.
there's you don't have to necessarily have to get a permit because it's so hard to get back in there that so few people go that they're
Um,
less concerned about it.
yeah.
Well, the reason nobody goes there is because hauling a canoe through those zones is effort, like
Yeah.
max effort. There's no trail. You're bushwhacking through, who knows what for
Yeah.
long. The portages are longer. You might have 2 or 3 mile portage with no trail. Well, I could not think of something more miserable than trying to portage a 60-pound, 16-foot canoe through those things stuck on your head while
Yeah.
getting eaten by flies. You can
Yeah.
take your pack raft, roll it up, put it in your backpack, and cruise through there. And now our flatwater boats are kind of like designed for that kind of thing. So it's not supposed to replace the
Yeah.
traditional stuff. It's supposed to be a new craft that can do things that you can't really do or are inconvenient to do with the traditional watercraft. And we've
Yeah.
always tried to pick around the edges and kind of be additive rather than a substitute.
Yeah. No, that's cool. I apologize because us Canadians were a little hard headed and sarcastic. So, um, but no, I love the fact that you're coming out and you're not saying, "Hey, this is a replacement for this." It's saying, "Hey, now you can do this." Because I know when I went from going backpacking to going to ultralight backpacking, for example, there's like a whole it's the same thing. It's I can do ultralight and do certain things that I can't do when I have my full set of gear, but I'm not going to be able to carry out a deer with my
Yep.
ultralight gear, right? So
Yeah.
you have different ways about it. And I did, I guess my thing is before I had looked into pack rafting and stuff like that, I had my hard shell kayak that I mentioned earlier before we got on. And that thing was great for what it did. And because in my mind, I was like, I can't go on a river when I feel like it's going to get punctured. But then I had a friend who had a pack raft eventually on the river that I was on. And I was like, oh, like you had said, those people go, you're going to die because they just don't get it.
Yep.
And then once I saw him, I was like, oh, he's fine. He's actually maneuvering and having a better time than I am because I didn't have to carry this big thing in on my car. He just pulls it out of his
Yeah.
bag basically and uses it. So do you think that I'm sure that was a hurdle to get over. Is that another hurdle again with the Canadian audience or when you come out with that and try to go into a different industry each time or
Yeah, it's always a hurdle, and you kind of have
yeah.
to demonstrate where the real like niche of use is, because a lot of
Yeah.
people haven't really been thinking about it from that perspective. If you live in Duluth, Minnesota, and you spent your whole life going to the Boundary Waters, you have a way of looking at the Boundary Waters, and you're just like,
Yeah.
this is how we do this. And so when I say, hey, this packraft is great for the Boundary Waters, you think, well, that doesn't make sense to me. And you have to shift your thinking of like,
Yeah.
oh, I can approach this from a different perspective. Or you also have to shift your thinking and think like, just if I want to go do the Boundary Waters from Southwest Colorado, well, I don't have a canoe in Minnesota, and I'm certainly not taking a canoe and putting it on my car and driving for
Yeah.
35 hours to get up there. And I can't check one on the airplane. So now I'm stuck with, I've got to deal with a rental.
Mhm.
And that means I got to reserve it. Who knows what condition it's in? I've got to meet
Yeah.
them. I've got to do the whole thing. I don't, nothing wrong with rentals. Rental companies are great and all that thing.
Yeah.
But for me, it's not how I like to do
Yeah.
things. And not much different than the guy in Duluth who's like, I want to go skiing in Colorado. It's like, okay, how many pairs of skis do you own? Are you going to go to Vail and buy a rental and do all that other stuff?
Yeah.
And if you want to go backcountry skiing in Colorado, even harder to find rentals. So,
Mhm.
but the packraft is like, hey, I can take our new Zephyr boat or our Chinook, throw it in the bag, fly to Duluth, rent a car, go up and do my trick. And then I might actually even be doing a traditional Boundary Waters trip, um, just because of the travel element that where
Yeah.
pack rafting made that more accessible to
Yeah.
me, even though I recognize the canoe is the best craft in that situation. Um, the canoe is not convenient for me because I don't live there. Same thing goes. I love paddling whitewater. South America is one of has incredible whitewater. I've only been down there once, and I actually went down and did a guided trip in Ecuador where they
Yeah.
rented a. We had whitewater kayaks demo, and that was great. But if I were to go back, I don't know where to get a kayak. And then renting a car, how I'm going to put the kayak on the roof. Well, we
Yeah.
have a really nice whitewater boat that can handle class 4 pretty reasonably. Well, I can just check that in my bag and go down and get a bunch of rivers done and have a great
Yeah.
time. And is it the best craft for that river? No, a whitewater kayak is, but getting a whitewater kayak to Chile is hard.
Yeah. No, that's good. I love how you're finding answers too. I'm the exact same way. I just want to take everything and go because the minute you got to start renting stuff, even gosh, even going to national parks and then having to rent a bear canister because you can't take yours. Next thing you have to deal with returning it versus going there and getting it. It's just that little extra hassle that can cause you a full day's worth of extra travel when you got to get a rental because you got to go on certain times and everything else, and it cuts that out
100%.
completely.
And then the rental service is open from 9 to 5,
Yeah,
and your flight arrives at 8 p.m. And
yeah,
they're like, okay, we have to wait till 9 o'clock the next morning to pick up
yeah,
the rental. And then our flight out is at 5 a.m.
yeah,
And so we're like, we have to actually be done with the trip and back to drop the rental off before it's inconvenient.
yeah. No, that's good. I wanted to just go back a little bit to when you were talking about the machines that you had to purchase and stuff like that. Um, I think it sounded really good. Like, it sounds like you have a really good mindset on like you were taking your time. I know that a lot of companies and a lot of people will try to do that instant growth. And I know some industries and some things you create, sometimes you have to take a big step to create your product. But I think a lot of the products and the services that we use can grow slowly, and I think slow growth can a lot like oftentimes be a lot better than that instant growth where you're just exploding and now you've just got a lot more problems because you don't know how to deal with them. Do you think it was beneficial for you guys to grow slower versus just getting hundreds of them made by someone else still like even now and then growing faster?
Absolutely. I feel like we were fortunate. Now we're a small industry or small business, and the paddle
Yeah.
sports industry itself is small. It's not a good way. Paddle sports is not a good way to make your fortune. It's a good way to pursue your passion, not a good way to
Yeah.
make a fortune. But we were fortunate. I think we were really fortunate to be able to grow without a lot of competition and grow slowly, and it really that benefited us. There are industries where that's just you don't have that choice, and I've got a
Yeah.
funny story about this. It's didn't happen to me, it happened to my mom. She went to outdoor retailer, and I can't remember whether it's 2004, 2005, 2006,
Yeah.
somewhere in that range, she went to outdoor retailer, and we don't traditionally go to outdoor retailer, but in the early years, she went as a vendor, not as a buyer, and so she had a booth, and she, stuck in the way back corner
Yeah.
of one of the tents or what have you with tiny booth, and right next to her are 2 surfers with a little camera that was on their wrist so they could take pictures while they were surfing. They were
Uh-huh.
GoPro, and
Yeah.
they had so she's hanging out with the founders of GoPro when
Wow.
they're just 2 surfer guys, like, that aren't business people. Now
Yeah.
and GoPro, went through the roof. They didn't have a choice, because if you're in consumer electronics and
Mhm.
cameras, you have Sony, Samsung, Apple, I mean,
Yeah.
Google. You have the biggest companies in the world who have so much more market power than you can possibly imagine. If you
Yeah.
don't accelerate your growth into the billions inside of a couple of years, your idea will get stolen, trampled, and you will lose everything. And so
Yeah.
I if you're in that camp, there are times where it's like, yeah, you got to go find out the big private equity and deal with all of that world
Yep.
and accelerated growth and marketing and all this other stuff where the goal is create market share and create sales long before creating profit. But
Yeah.
that's not the only business model out there that works. And there's a joke out there that, the old fashioned business model is make stuff and then sell it for more than it cost you to make it is a surprisingly simple way to earn a living.
Yeah.
And, we kind of approach it from that perspective is, we're, we've been fortunate to grow at the pace we've grown and we've let the market really grow with us rather than trying to push for growth.
Yeah. I think that sounds great that it's almost like you don't want to outpace the market because you know your market and hey, if we grew too fast, there's not even that market yet to really handle what you could potentially push if you were to just go in even more so with like a bunch of debt and stuff like that. So,
Yeah, and then the backlash effect of a mistake there means you lose your business.
yeah.
And, we really saw that with the COVID in the bike industry, where there's huge boom in demand combined with a huge bottleneck in the manufacturers because there are only a few manufacturers for bikes over in Taiwan. And
Oh,
so to spool all that up, all the brands ended up committing. And so they were essentially a, agreeing to volume purchases way out in advance, trying to get inventory so they had it to sell when it was really the demand was high early in
yeah.
COVID. And then when the demand fell in 2023, they're
Yeah.
still dealing with that outflow of
Wow.
having way too much inventory and the cost of carrying inventory. And then, when you start putting uh, I remember I never saw a mountain bike from a premium brand on sale before 2020.
Yeah.
And now they've had so many 20, 30, 40% off sales that it's
Hmm.
hard for them to sell them at retail because everybody's just sitting here saying, well, in 6 months, that bike will be 30% off. So why would I pay full price for it? And
Yeah.
so I've seen a lot of closures and rebuys and bankruptcies in the bike industry over the last few years. So if you get ahead of yourself, you get in real trouble.
Yeah. That's interesting. I didn't even I hear about that. That's crazy. I don't want to be in the bike industry then.
There, I can't remember what it was goes, but there's some really good podcasts, long ones, like 5 or
Yeah.
6 episode podcasts on what
Yeah.
happened to the bike industry in over the last 5 years.
Wow. That's crazy. And I actually bought one of those discounted bikes.
Of
So,
course.
well, who wouldn't? Um, okay, so I guess moving into the next portion of it, you kind of let me know a little bit about some things that happened. But do you have an oh crap moment as you were building your brand that you would say, oh man, like if I could do this again, I wouldn't do this or I would do this differently?
Hmm. That's a good question. We've nothing where we've nothing where I felt like we've made a catastrophic mistake, and I think we've been lucky as
That's
far as
good.
that goes. But second guessing yourself is the nature of business. You're always second guessing yourself,
Yeah.
and y- it's business is hard. We've had 20 years of steady growth with very few years where we pulled back, and then this year there's no water in the West, and we're experiencing the
Yeah.
most significant, you know, business downturn that we've had in 25 years. And we go from like every year, no, sales are going to be great in April and May, to this year I'm like, wow, we might actually be losing money, and thank goodness I saved all this cash over the
Yeah.
last 10 years, and because we're going to have to spend it this year.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really hard as a business owner to like not get caught up in the daily of just like, where's the money going? Are we going to
Yeah.
make it to next week and next month? And we're a really healthy business, and I feel like I know so many small businesses that they're just like employees. Sometimes they're
Hmm.
living paycheck to paycheck too, and it's just
Yeah.
like, are we going to make payroll this month? And so um, I have a lot of respect for the fortitude of small business owners to like, you know, deal with the
Yeah.
stress of that.
Yeah. When I think it's great to hear that like you have that mindset of, hey, I think when people see a business grow, they go, oh, look at all the profits that they're taking. Can't they make their price lower? But you have to have that forethought of, hey, okay, as I grow, I need to have this because you never know when the market's going to turn a little bit, and you have to dip into those pots that maybe you didn't you have, and when you dip in, you feel bad, but you're like, no, but that's why it's there, right?
Yep.
Knowing that, okay, it's going to come back, and you have that versus some people who live that, and sometimes you just can't help living that day to day paycheck kind of a thing, but you also have to look and go, okay, I can't have, maybe I can't have 50 SKUs. Maybe I should only have 20. And that way I can have a little more money saved and I can add in slowly instead of having so much stuff. You know what I mean?
Yep. One of, I think f- there's actually, I think, a Jeff Bezos comment basically that no matter how big the business is, there's no business that's infinite. All businesses will die.
Yeah.
I think Hudson Bay Company died.
Oh, yeah.
I think it was the oldest operating business in the world. It was like 400 and something years old as continuous a corporation, and it's gone.
Yeah.
And at one point it owned something like 40% of the landmass of Canada. It's crazy. Um, don't quote me on that, but I know it was like,
Yeah.
it was a huge
Yeah.
company in the
Yeah.
1700s, and it's spent its last days as a department store somewhere in Ottawa or something like that.
Yeah. I remember that department store.
Yeah. So what's really interesting is when you get bigger, yeah, the money gets more, but the losses also accelerate. So
Yeah.
back 10 years ago when we had 10 employees, payroll might be $25,000 every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So if I've got 200,000 in the bank, I have 8 payrolls. Great.
Yeah.
Well, now I have 46 employees and payroll's $100,000.
Yeah.
So now, $1 million in the bank, which looks like a big number, three, that's like just a few months of payroll.
Yeah.
And so that's where the whole thing goes. No matter how big you are, it, when cash flow turns negative, it turns exponentially negative.
Yeah.
And so you can lose $1 billion business just as fast as you can lose $1 million business, as just as fast as you can lose a $10,000 business, because the it's all relative.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's even alluding back to GoPro, right? They
Yep.
blew up, and
Yeah,
then now
and
they're
then cratered,
like,
and that
where's GoPro? Where's GoPro? Right? Everybody's kind of taking over.
yeah,
So
exactly, and they went public, their stock price went way up, then it cratered.
yeah.
I don't think they went through a bankruptcy, but they did go through massive restructuring.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, okay, so I wanted to go a little bit into you yourself. Maybe, how do you stay connected with the outdoor space? Because a lot of people, they get into the outdoor space and then now they get disconnected from it because you're working so hard or you might get sick of it. So how do you as a business owner stay connected maybe to your brand or even just the outdoors itself?
That's a really good question. Um, and I've got a little bit of a unique story. I was super fortunate. I grew up in an outdoor household and I've been a
Yeah.
dabbler in everything. So I was never like singularly passionate about one sport. I grew up fishing, fly fishing, hunting, backcountry skiing, downhill skiing, cross country skiing, dog mushing,
Yeah.
like canoe trips,
Yeah.
raft trips, everything, hiking, you name it.
Wow.
So I've had a lot of different like sports and passions that I've pursued over the years. And it's funny, I'll pick up one and be like, from 2008 to 2015, all I did is mountain bike. Oh, if I had a weekend, I only went mountain biking. And the last 5 years, I hardly mountain bike at all. And then from
Yeah.
2015 to 2020, all I did was whitewater paddle. If I had a minute, I went whitewater paddling. So I kind of like balance around and a lot of those things. But for me personally, I the last 6 years have been pretty a roller coaster. So we have my wife and I have one son. He's a sweetheart, but he is autistic, and we had him 2 weeks before COVID shut down.
Wow.
So it's like, we went to the hospital, she had the
Yeah.
baby, everything was great. We went home, and then the world shut down. And then
Yeah.
I was like 100% on the business because the first 2 months of COVID, everything was shut down. It was like, how are we paying employees? How are we keeping this business
Yeah.
afloat? And then the faucet turned on, and it was suddenly like I was hiring a new employee every week, trying to keep
Yeah.
up with business
Wow.
and demand and stuff. So I wasn't home, and I didn't go hardly paddling at all during that time or doing any kind of stuff. And then right about the time as things kind of like started to smooth out from there, well, that's when our son got diagnosed and, behavioral issues came out. And so we were like now swimming with, having a child with a disability. And that's
Yeah.
a whole separate
Yeah.
commitment and just kind of takes your brain and your focus elsewhere. And it's really taken my
Yeah.
wife's focus outside of there. And then on top of all that, I got COVID for the first time in 2023 and then got long COVID, which
Oh,
really sucked.
yeah.
Um, and so I spent all of 2024 with no energy. I could barely, like a mile walk was like, wow, that's a lot of effort for
Wow.
the day. And I built my way around it and got
Yeah.
good treatment. And now I'm doing a lot better. So in all honesty, the last 5 years have been tough, but it's almost, like a life in your late 40s. You're just kind of like
Yeah.
dealing.
Yeah.
But I've come out of it pretty good. I feel pretty
Yeah.
healthy now. We've got a good routine with our son. We're getting
Yeah.
care. The school's really good to him, and it's like I'm like starting to build back up. I just bought a Zwift bike trainer, and I'm like I'm going to start getting back into shape. And I
Oh,
just
awesome.
went over on a trip to Europe and for a trade show, but we also went to a pack rafting festival there, and I was able to paddle, and so you kind of just build the stuff back up. Sometimes you have
Yeah.
down years. That's
Yeah.
I think that's anybody's life, and it's
Yeah.
certainly if you've made it to 50 and you haven't had a really tough sequence, you're lucky. But I think a lot of us
Yeah.
have kind of had those kind of down times, and you gotta fight through them and get back up.
Yeah.
But I try to get out. I try to get trips in. I try to fit trips with friends in and
Yeah.
prioritize and kind of make those a thing that is like sacred. Like I'm not
Yeah.
skipping. I don't care if the business feels like it's blowing up. I'm still going to be like, I'm going on this trip. We'll
Yeah.
deal with it when I get home.
Yeah. Does your son like the outdoors at all or anything like that?
We are so fortunate, and it's actually pretty common with kids on the autism spectrum. Is the
Okay.
outdoors are um, helpful to them, because social situations and like a
Yeah.
lot of noise and stuff is hard. Whereas nature is amazing to him.
Yeah.
So he's not athletic and coordinated, so he doesn't want to. He still won't ride a bike, won't ride a strider bike, won't do things like that. Doesn't want to pick up a paddle and
Yeah.
do that stuff. But he's endlessly fascinated with animals and bugs and things like that. So
Yeah.
you stick him in a pack raft and we go floating down the river and he's like, there's a heron,
Yeah.
there's a tricolored heron, there's a blackbird, that's a red-winged
Yeah.
blackbird. And he's excited and loves
That's
it.
great.
We took him up to the Arctic last year and did a trip off the Noatak River, and he did amazing and spent 8 hours a day in a boat with me. And
Wow.
so I feel really lucky that we can get that.
Yeah. That's the best, that father and son bond of
Yeah.
just like seeing your kids so happy and stuff like that. I mean, that's awesome. Oh my goodness. Um, okay, so I'm gonna ask you just one more question, I guess, in that genre of um, if there's anything that you know, staying connected, not connected. Was there anything in the outdoor space that, as you started the business, or maybe you're still seeing that you didn't know, if someone told you it was going to be hard, but you just kind of brushed it off, and then you were like, "Oh, I should have listened to them in the first place."
Not in the outdoor space, but certainly in running a company. Not in
Yeah.
outdoor space specifically, but certainly in running a company. Um, you know, uh, so before I came back to Alpacka, I went to law
Mhm.
school and was an attorney for 10 years. I actually did bankruptcy law. I thought that it turned out to help me a lot in running a business.
Yeah.
And you would think, as a lawyer, like I'm like hard nosed and, no BS and like,
Yeah.
but I'm a softie. Like I love my employees. I care about them. I want them to succeed. And when they don't act well, have a hard time disciplining. I have a terrible time firing them. And I remember early on when I was like came back to run the business,
Yeah.
went to a few different business things and to a person, every single business owner, when you go to these conferences and they say, what do you wish you knew at the beginning that you didn't? And everybody's like, fire faster. And they're not
Yeah.
being negative, but they're just like when you have an employee that is causing real problems and you kind of like feel bad and you have like an emotional connection to them and you don't,
Yeah.
and it's not working, they're just like, you have to say, you know, it's not the end of the world. Like they'll
Yeah.
go find another job that fits them and you,
Yeah.
but I still struggle with that. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of people do.
Do you
So
think it comes down to not knowing that that person might not be able to pay their bills kind of thing? Or is it just a, 'cause I've done that before. It's hard for me to tell someone that I don't need them as an assistant for my photography and stuff like that
mhm.
anymore. And my
Yep.
wife's like, we just can't have them anymore. And I'm like, oh, but I love them as a person. It's like, yeah, but
Yep.
they just are either they can be toxic to the work environment, or maybe they just don't have the skills. And sometimes you try to train up a person, right? And then they just can't grasp that skill no matter what. And you're like, I guess this isn't good for you. So maybe even you're just repositioning them somewhere in the company saying, hey, you can't do this. Maybe maybe you can, you know, do something else.
Yeah, the where I've had to learn the difference is there's a difference between somebody that's having a hard time. And I
Yeah.
know people, they're just like, "Yep, sorry, I don't, your personal problems are not my problems. And if you're late for work or not producing, you're out of here." And I'm not like that. Like
Yeah.
I have a lot of sympathy for people and their life experiences. But it's the different thing when they're not fitting in with the company. And
Yeah.
so like you're clashing heads with them and not agreeing on the direction of things. And so it has nothing to do with their talent or what's going on at home. It has everything to do with like, you just don't fit here.
Yeah.
And, that's the one where you have to kind of like be like, when somebody doesn't fit, you have to be nice about it, but it's like,
Yeah.
this isn't a fit, and
Yeah.
going find a place, because it's amazing how when one of those people leaves, it's like the whole mood in the factory lightens because
Yeah.
everybody was dealing with the with the challenges. And as
Yeah.
soon as they're gone, everybody's like, "Oh, I feel so much better." And it wasn't because they were a bad person. In some cases, it's even a lot of people stay friends with them outside of it. It's just that they
Yeah.
didn't work with the business and the way it
Yeah.
operated.
Interesting. No, that's
But
good. That's really good advice.
yeah, let me add, the other interesting thing. It's okay, Will. Um, the other thing that I see in the outdoor industry, though, is there's been a lot of change. You bring that kind of stuff up. And my parents were early in the outdoor industry. And, in the 50s and 60s, that's the beginning of the whole outdoor industry. So they were close personal friends. Hold on. Let me see that. Okay. Ouch. And the backing, sorry about that. Back in
No,
the
that's okay.
day, they were close personal friends with the Chenards who started Patagonia and Peter
Hmm.
Metcalf, who eventually took over Black Diamond, and Royal Robbins and all these like famous figures. And just because the
Yeah.
industry was so small. And I have noticed over the last 10 years that a lot of the brands that are really big names in the outdoor industry, the the founders are moving on.
Yeah.
And, you know, the Chenards are still kind of active in Patagonia, but it's largely moved on. And, um, Kokatat just sold, I think, it sold early on the pandemic from the founder,
Hmm.
but now it's owned by Mustang. And I keep seeing that over and over again. And so we're kind of getting into second generation in a lot of the signature brands in the outdoor industry.
Yeah.
And, uh, I'm curious of where that's gonna go.
Yeah. Do you think that that can potentially, I guess it could potentially be good because it could be bring a refresh to some things, but then also it could possibly lose the original vision and outlook on it?
It depends on how it's done.
Yeah.
So you could definitely get a refresh because young people have great ideas and new
Yeah.
things. And you in the outdoor industry, I think you have to be passionate about. You don't have to be good at everything. You just have
Yeah.
to be passionate about what you're doing. And all of the people that founded the kind of like iconic brands of the outdoor industry, they weren't business people. They were people who are passionate about the activity.
Yeah.
And so that's what drove them. And then, but the problem is they build a brand that's worth 10, 20, 50, $100 million, $1 billion. They can't sell it
Yeah.
to the passionate young employee who's going to have the ideas and the sort of like drive. If you want to sell your brand for $30 million, there's not many people that have that. So
Yeah.
you either sell it to another brand that has the equity to bring them into that, or you sell it to private equity. And I
Mhm.
worry, and there's tons of worry that private equity keeps buying into the outdoor industry, but their passion is to make money, and that's it.
Yeah.
And so, every time I see a brand sold to private equity, I'm like, what's this brand going to be like in
Yeah.
5 years? And in a lot of cases, it's not a good picture.
Yeah. We did have a guest on, and they had sold to private equity, and with the understanding and the deal that, hey, once we're sold, you're still going to be a part of the company and everything else. And the minute the contract was signed and everything, they pushed her to the curb, and they just knew that the legal battles that are going to be entailed in that and everything else is just going to make you go bankrupt. So
Yeah.
there's no way to fight that. So it's sad that it can be that way, where it's like, oh, you feel like you're still going to be a part of your child's life, so to speak, and
Yeah.
then all of a sudden it's like you get kicked out of your child's life and they take it out of the country.
E
So
ex exactly, and you have to think about that hard when you're deciding whether to sell your company,
yeah,
and I know it's, t I don't blame anybody for doing it because it's a
oh
lot
yeah,
of work to build it, and
yeah,
then you're stuck there at the end, and you're like, I got into this because I really loved the sport, and now I'm looking at spreadsheets and dealing with staff and
yeah,
dealing with paying things and other things, and I'm 50 some years old, and I can sell it to have enough money to live on for the rest of my life, and I can go do the things I really wanna do, so I don't
yeah,
blame anybody for doing it, but it's
yeah,
definitely I do think there's a mental side of, like, if you're selling it, like, I tell you what, I've thought about this, like, I'm like, if we get to the point where I do have to sell Alpaca, or decide to sell it, it's gonna be a hard decision between, like, do I try to cling on to it and have a say in it, where I'm like, "Nope, we're cutting it off, and
yeah,
I'm just going to, like, put on the blinders and say it's
yeah,
now somebody else's child, and it's
yeah,
okay whatever happens to it."
yeah. I think for when most people, when you start to lose the passion for it, you kind of will look at it and go, am I losing the passion and I need to get out of this? Or what are your reasons? I think what you had said is like it's almost like you have to look at it and reflect on it and see if it's a good decision. I mean, a lot of people in the end you're there to make money, but then also you build a brand, and people love that brand and everything else. And it sounds like you said, you're a softie, and so you care about people so much. And so it's like, okay, I could sell this or whatever, but then you also look at it and go, okay, well then are these employees still going to have their jobs? And it would
Yeah,
almost be that saying of, hey, listen, I'm willing to put the blinders on and not be a part of this anymore. Just contractually, you still need to keep these people for at least a year or something like that, so that way, instead of taking it, maybe they take it out of country if you all of a sudden were to sell, for example.
totally. I think about that a lot in terms of, like, what is my long-term strategy.
Yeah,
Yeah. No, I think about that, constantly when I'm kinda like,
yeah,
because 'cause I'm 48, and so I'm like, in theory, I could do this for 20 more years,
yeah,
or, I could be like, "Hey, it's 10 years from now, I'm ready to do something different."
yeah. That's good. Well, I guess you answered my last question, which was basically advice for somebody who's in the outdoor space. I mean, I think the last 10 minutes that we talked was basically a lot of advice. If you're going to look to do a company, is look at why you're doing it. And when you go out, if you're doing it for the right reasons.
I think that I'll go back to this one, like, the key to success in the outdoor space is being singularly passionate and good at one thing. So, my mom, "Wayland, I'll be done in 1 minute, okay?" He's like, "I wanna play." He's been sick
I
home
know.
homesick for 2 days, so now he's all
Oh,
all spooled up. Anyway, so my mom, she is not a good business person.
Yeah.
She is not great at marketing or sales or anything like that. She is singularly passionate about design and creativity. And so all of the evolution of Alpacka's designs are from her. And she was successful because she pushed them.
Yeah.
And I have been much more passionate about manufacturing. And so I
Yeah.
focused on that, but I'm still passionate about the product. But
Yeah.
I'm not a go out and bang on doors and market and sell kind of person. I'm much more like continue to focus on the product side of
Yeah.
things. So I think if you've got a passion somewhere and you can focus on that and pursue that, then I think you can be successful. But if you're only kind of trying to get to the bottom line of money and, coming at it from a business school background, you can
Yeah.
struggle.
Yeah.
And I
That's
look
really
at
good
the
advice.
successful cottage companies, and they're all like passionate for the product and the craft afterwards.
Yeah.
And, and then, um, I mean, and that goes all the way back to the beginning. You can come and snuggle me.
Hey, buddy.
And I mean, if you think about even the biggest brands that are out there, we'll go back to them. Yvon Chouinard was a climber
Yeah.
who built Patagonia and what split off to be Black Diamond Equipment because he was making stuff to go climbing in Yosemite.
Yeah.
And Dub Tompkins at North Face does the same thing. And I don't know them personally. I'm sure the guys at Enlightened Equipment now who make such incredible stuff for sleeping bags and kind of like change the sleeping bag market. They're not in it because they're business guys. They're in it because they're passionate about sleeping bags.
Yeah.
And Mike St. Pierre that started Hiker Light Mountain Gear he's he's a smart business guy, but
Yeah.
he's neurotically passionate about ultralight backpacking. And
Yeah.
so that's what drives him. And I'm sure the guys at Z-Packs, and I know that Durston at Durston Tent, they're all like this.
Yeah.
And so if you have the passion for the product and the sport you're doing, that's what's going to carry you through the bad days.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for all the insight and everything. Okay, I'm gonna go into a quick lightning round. I'm gonna let you get back to your son so he can go play with you. I know as soon as my son comes home, he just wants to like cuddle
Yeah.
for about 5 minutes, and then next thing you know, he wants to go play basketball. So, um, um, okay. So before I get into that lightning round, if people are looking for Alpacka Rafts, where can we find you guys online and on socials?
AlpackaRaft.com for our website online. That's going to be the most comprehensive source of information. We're on Instagram, a little bit on Facebook. We don't do as much on socials, but there's some good stuff there. If you're into hunting, we have an Alpacka Raft hunt channel on Instagram. So we keep that kind of split up as well. And then we've got pretty good dealers, mostly focused in the West, but we around the world.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I was actually in North Carolina and I passed by a place and I saw one of your rafts outside, blown up on display on the side of the on
Oh,
out front of the
awesome.
building.
Yeah, we just
So
got into Nantahala Outdoor Center this year, so,
yeah,
that's yeah.
that's cool. Okay, so without further ado, I'll get into the really just like 1, 2 word, maybe a sentence answers. But first question I left asking everybody is your favorite national park.
Denali,
Denali.
because I
Sweet.
grew up there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, yeah, Denali.
That I was gonna go there a few years ago, and then it ended up being like June, July when we were gonna go. And my best friend, who she's from North Pole, Alaska,
Yeah,
his wife's from North Pole, Alaska. She was
yeah.
like, "Don't go there in June or June, July, because you'll be getting eaten by giant mosquitoes." And
Yeah.
so we changed our plans. But all right, next question is solo hike or crew mission?
Crew, for
Crew.
sure. I haven't done much solo stuff. I'm much more of a small crew kind of person.
Yeah. Worst trail snack you've ever tried?
Oh, man. We used to make this terrible thing on our trips that we called the fried egg, and it was a pilot bread, which is basically a shelf stable for 30 years piece of, like, hardtack,
Yeah.
and then we put peanut butter on it, and then we, um, scoop open the peanut butter, and then we put squeezable margarine on top of that and salami on top of that. It was awful, but it had a lot of calories.
Ugh, there's no point of that part of that sounds appetizing at all. Okay, so what's the best trail snack you've ever tried, or your go-to trail snack?
Oh man, best trail snack that I'm I'm a huge fan of dried peaches. I dry
Okay,
them at home. I love dried peaches because
I'm this close
there's
to getting a food dehydrator, so
yeah, I mean, I think there's something special about a peach. You only get them for a few months a year.
yeah,
The flavor's absolutely incredible, and you dry them and they stay amazing.
yeah. Next question is, what's one outdoor skill you still kind of suck
Running. I don't run anywhere.
at? All right, what is the biggest splurge you've ever made for your business?
Oh, yeah, we spent $200,000 on an automated cutting machine 4 months before COVID. I spent over 30% of the business's cash, and then COVID hit, and I was like, "We are going under." And
Oh,
then
wow.
the the boom
Yeah.
hit, and if we didn't have that cutting machine, we would have not survived. So it was like the most fortuitous, but like, I mean, literally like it showed up and then COVID hit. And I was like, we get our money back. I need that money.
All right. Second last question is tent, hammock, or cowboy camping?
Um, my preference is cowboy, but if I must, I'll sleep in a tent. But I love to sleep just sleeping bag on and pad on the ground.
Oh, that's awesome. And then I guess what's one word that best you would use to best describe the outdoor industry right now? That could go very deep, but we'll just go very quick with it. So,
Um, it's at the tip of my tongue and I can't come up with it. I would say we just saw some deer. Um, whew, what it's in a state of flux. It's like
yeah.
uncertain is the
Yeah.
best word. Uncertain.
Okay, cool. All right, awesome. Well, Thor, thank you so much for being on. I mean, it was great talking about alpaca rafts and just everything that you guys have in store and the stories you told were incredible, by the way. So, everybody, thank you so much for listening. We look forward to the next episode. And Thor, I look forward to seeing you on a river somewhere sooner than later. Thanks for being
Oh,
on.
absolutely. It was super fun. I actually got to tell a bunch of stuff that I haven't told before. Sorry for the chaos in the background,
Oh, no, it's
everybody.
totally fine.
But that's my life right now. So people
Yeah,
get to see it.
awesome. Well, thank you. Talk to you soon.